I never imagined I would see my own daughter so furious, screaming at me like a maniac because I refused to give her the money I earned from selling my property. And even less did I think my oldest son would defend her with such violence that he would end up breaking one of my ribs with a single shove. But what neither of them knew was that in exactly 20 minutes, they would bitterly regret being born when they discovered the truth I had been silently keeping. My name is Martha. I am 64 years old. And all my life, I have been a simple, hardworking woman, one of those who wakes up every day at 5:30 in the morning to prepare coffee and think about everything she has to do. I live in a modest little house on the outskirts of the small town with my small garden where I grow tomatoes and cilantro, and where every morning I greet my chickens before giving them their food. My routine has been the same for years. Black coffee without sugar-buttered toast. And then I sit on this porch to watch the sunrise while I plan my day. I have been a widow for 8 years. My husband, Edward, died of a sudden heart attack, leaving me alone with a property we had inherited from his parents, but which was in very poor condition. It was a large property with nearly 20 acres, but it needed a lot of work and money to be productive again. Throughout all these years, while my children, Michael and Patricia, lived their lives in the city, I managed as best I could to stay afloat. I worked cleaning houses, selling turkey and mashed potato plates on the weekends, and even babysitting the neighbors' children to be able to pay my basic expenses. I never asked my children for financial help because I knew they had their own responsibilities. And besides, I have always been a proud woman, one of those who prefers to solve her problems alone rather than be a burden to anyone. The farm had become a constant worry. The roofs leaked. The fences were broken and the vegetation had grown so much that it looked like an abandoned jungle. Several neighbors had suggested I sell it, but I always refused because I felt I would be betraying Edward's memory. That land had been his family's dream for generations, and getting rid of it felt like tearing out a piece of my heart. But 6 months ago, everything changed. I received an unexpected visit from a very well-dressed man in a gray suit and a red tie who introduced himself as a representative of a construction company. He explained that they were interested in buying my property to develop a housing project, and when he mentioned the figure they were willing to pay, I almost fainted right there. $180,000. Never in my life had I heard such a large amount of money directed towards me. The man told me that the location of my property was perfect for building a modern residential area and that they were willing to pay that price without haggling as long as I was willing to sign the papers in the coming weeks. For days, I couldn't sleep thinking about that offer. I would get up in the pre-dawn hours and walk around the farm remembering all the happy moments I had lived there with Edward, but also thinking about all the possibilities that money could bring to my life. I could fix my little house, buy new clothes, travel to see my grandchildren who live far away, and above all, have the financial peace of mind I had never had in my 64 years of life. Finally, after much reflection and even dreaming of Edward asking me to be happy, I made the hardest decision of my life. I sold the farm. The paperwork was surprisingly fast, and in less than 1 month, I had an amount of money in my bank account that I never thought I would possess. The first thing I did after receiving the money was remain in absolute silence. I didn't tell anyone, not even my neighbor Grace, who had always been like a sister to me, and who knew all my secrets. Something inside me told me I should keep this information private until I decided exactly what to do with such a fortune. I kept the sales documents in a metal box that I have under my bed, along with the few pieces of jewelry my mother had left me. For the first 2 weeks after the sale, my life continued exactly the same. I woke up at 5:30, made my coffee, fed my chickens, and continued my usual routine. The only difference was that now, when I sat on the porch in the afternoons, a secret smile would appear on my face as I thought about all the wonderful things I could do with that money. I had started making a mental list of my priorities. First, I wanted to completely fix my little house, change the roof that leaked during the rains, paint the walls that were faded, install a new bathroom because mine was more than 20 years old, and buy a modern stove to replace the old one that sometimes didn't light well. I also thought about buying a used truck, but in good condition because I was tired of depending on the public bus to go to town. But above all, there was something very special I wanted to do with that money, something I had been secretly planning and which I knew would change the lives of many people. However, it was not yet the time to reveal it. I didn't even dare to say it out loud to myself because I was afraid the emotion would betray me. Everything changed one Thursday afternoon when I was watering my tomato plants. I heard the engine of a car approaching along the dirt road that leads to my house, and when I looked up, I saw my daughter Patricia's white car parking in front of my door. I was very surprised to see her on a weekday because she worked in an office in the city and normally only visited me on Sundays. Patricia got out of the car with a strange smile. One of those smiles that I knew very well because I had seen them since she was a little girl. It was the smile she put on when she wanted to ask me for something important, or when she had played a trick. She was wearing a yellow dress I had never seen her in before, high-heeled shoes that sank into the dirt of my yard, and a large handbag hanging from her arm. "Mom, what a lovely surprise to find you out here," she said, approaching to give me a kiss on the cheek. "I need to talk to you about something very important." I invited her into the house and prepared a glass of cool water with ice. We sat in my small living room, she on the sofa, and I in my favorite chair, the wooden rocking chair that had been my grandmother's. Patricia seemed nervous. She played with her car keys and avoided looking me directly in the eyes. "Mom," she began softly, "yesterday I was talking to Mrs. Judy, the one who lives near where your property was, and she told me something that left me very surprised." My heart started beating faster. I knew exactly where this conversation was heading, and a sense of alarm began to grow in my chest. Judy was the biggest gossip in the area, and she had clearly seen all the movement of the construction company around my property. "She told me you sold the farm." "Mom, is that true?" Patricia was now looking at me intently with that expression she put on when she was a teenager and questioned me about whether I had found anything suspicious in her room. I couldn't deny the truth to my own daughter, especially when it was obvious she already knew. So I nodded slowly. "Yes, Patricia, I sold the property a few weeks ago." My daughter's eyes lit up in a way I had never seen before, as if she had won the lottery. "Oh, Mom, what wonderful news! And for how much did you sell it? It must have been for a good amount, right?" Something in her tone of voice made me very uncomfortable. It was not the reaction I had expected from a daughter worried about her mother. She didn't ask me how I felt about selling her father's land, or if it had been difficult to make that decision, or if I needed emotional support. She only wanted to know how much money I had received. "It was a fair sale," I replied cautiously, without giving specific details about the amount. Patricia leaned forward, getting closer to me. "Mom, you know you can trust me. I am your daughter, and I worry a lot about your future. I imagine it must have been a considerable amount, and I want to make sure you are making the best decisions for your financial security." Her words sounded nice, but there was something about her attitude I didn't like at all. It was as if I were talking to a salesperson trying to convince me to buy something, not my daughter genuinely concerned about my well-being. "Patricia, I appreciate your concern, but I am perfectly capable of handling my own financial affairs." "Of course, Mom, I didn't mean to say you weren't capable." Her voice softened, but I could detect a hint of frustration. "It's just that, well, Aaron and I have been going through some financial problems lately. The business hasn't been going as well as we hoped, and I thought maybe it was the real reason for her unscheduled visit. She hadn't come to see me because she was worried about me, or because she wanted to spend time with her mother. She had come because she had found out I had money and she wanted a piece." "Maybe what Patricia," I asked, although I knew perfectly well what she was going to say. "Maybe you could help us a little bit. Mom, I'm not asking for charity. It's just a temporary loan until the business stabilizes. You could lend us about $20,000 or $30,000. And I promise we'll pay you back with interest as soon as we can." I remained silent for several seconds, looking at my daughter's face and trying to process what I had just heard. $20,000 or $30,000 was not a small amount, and the casual way she had asked for it left me completely bewildered. It was as if she were asking to borrow $20 to buy bread, not a fortune that represented years of my life working. "Patricia, I said firmly that money from the sale of the property is not for lending to anyone. I have my own plans for it. The expression on her face changed immediately. The sweet smile disappeared and was replaced by a grimace of disapproval that painfully reminded me of when she was a spoiled child who didn't get what she wanted. What plans, Mom? What are you going to do with so much money at your age? It's not like you're going to buy a new house or travel the world. It would be much smarter to invest that money in something productive like errands and my business. Her words hurt me deeply. At my age, I repeated, feeling as if she had slapped me. You're telling me that because I'm 64, I no longer have the right to enjoy my own money. No, Mom, that's not what I meant, she quickly replied. But I could see in her eyes that it was exactly what she had meant. It's just that, well, it would be more practical if the money were used for something that benefits the whole family. The whole family, I murmured, feeling the indignation growing in my chest. And when did the whole family help me when I was struggling alone to support myself after your father died? When did the whole family worry about whether I had enough money to buy food or medicine? Patricia turned red as a tomato. Mom, we didn't know you were going through difficulties if you had asked for help. You didn't know. I interrupted, getting up from my rocking chair. You didn't know I was working cleaning other people's houses at 60 years old. You didn't know I was selling turkey and mashed potato plates on the weekends to be able to pay for electricity. You didn't know I was getting up at 4 a.m. to go babysit because I needed every dime I could earn. My daughter lowered her gaze, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. Mom, I understand you went through difficult times, but now things are different. Now you have money and we really need help. And why do you need help? I asked, crossing my arms. The last time we spoke, you told me the business was going very well, that you had secured several new clients. Patricia squirmed on the sofa, clearly uneasy about having to admit the truth. Well, it's just that Aaron made some investments that didn't turn out as we expected. And then we had some unexpected expenses. What kind of unexpected expenses, Patricia? We bought a new car, we remodeled the house, and Aaron invested in some stocks that, well, we lost quite a bit of money. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My daughter and her husband had squandered their money on luxuries and bad investments, and now they wanted me to bail them out with the money I had earned from selling the property I had struggled with for years. So, you spent your money irresponsibly, and now you want me to pay the consequences of your bad decisions, I said, feeling the anger starting to boil in my veins. It's not like that, Mom. We just need a small loan to stabilize again. It's an investment in your family's future. My family, I repeated bitterly. Where was my family when I needed help? Where was my family when my knees hurt so much from cleaning floors that I could barely walk at night? Where was my family when I had to choose between buying medicine or buying food? Patricia abruptly stood up, and I could see her patience was running out. It's okay, Mom. We understand you are resentful, but you can't punish us forever for past mistakes. I'm not punishing you, Patricia. I am simply protecting something that is mine by right. But that money comes from Dad's property. That property was also our inheritance. Her words hit me like lightning. Your inheritance? I shouted, feeling all my composure vanish. Your inheritance! That property was abandoned for years while I was dying trying to maintain it. You never lifted a finger to help with the expenses with the maintenance with anything. And now that I converted it into money with my effort and my decision, it turns out it's your inheritance. Inheritance is inheritance, Mom. It doesn't matter if you sold it or not. Just then, I heard the engine of another car approaching. Through the window, I saw my son Michael's black pickup truck parking next to Patricia's car. My heart sank because I knew this visit was not a coincidence. Clearly, Patricia had planned all this in advance. Michael entered the house without even knocking on the door, as if it were his own house. He is a tall, heavy-set man, 35 years old, with a messy beard and always dressed in old t-shirts and ripped jeans. He had gained a lot of weight in recent years and had that tired look of someone who drinks too much. "Hi, Mom," he said with a forced smile. "How are you?" Patricia told me the good news about the sale of the property. "Of course she told you," I muttered. sitting back down in my rocking chair because my legs were trembling with pure indignation. Michael sat down heavily on the sofa next to his sister, and I could immediately smell the aroma of beer on his breath. It was barely at 3 hours 0 minutes in the afternoon, and he had already been drinking. "Mom," Michael interjected with that hoarse voice he had when he tried to sound serious. "I think we should talk as a family about how to handle this money in the best way. There is nothing to talk about, Michael. The money is mine, and I will decide what to do with it." "Mom, be reasonable," Patricia intervened. "We're not asking you to give us everything. We just want you to help us a little bit. Michael also has his financial problems." I looked at my older son, this 35-year-old man who had never been able to keep a job for more than 6 months in a row. "And what are your financial problems, Michael?" He shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. "Well, I owe some house payments, and I have some outstanding debts." "What kind of debts?" "That doesn't matter, Mom. The important thing is that we are family, and families help each other." "Families help each other," I repeated slowly. "How interesting that you say that now after 8 years in which I practically didn't exist to you." The two siblings looked at each other with that complicity I knew very well since they were children. It was the same look they exchanged when they had broken something in the house and were deciding what lie they were going to tell me. But now they were adults. And that look scared me much more than when they were 8 and 10 years old. "Mom," Michael said, leaning forward, "I think you're being a little unfair. We have always been there for you." "Always been there." I laughed bitterly. "Michael, when was the last time you visited me without needing something? When was the last time you called me just to ask how I was?" "Mom, you know I work a lot." "You work a lot?" I interrupted him. "If you can barely keep a job for more than a few months, and when you have a job, you spend it all on beer and those vending machines at the bar?" Michael's face turned red as a chili. "That's not true. I don't have a gambling problem." "Please, Michael, the whole town knows you owe money at 3 different bars. Last week, Aaron's wife told me you had borrowed $500 for an emergency, and Ethan told me he saw you spending it on the slot machines." Patricia quickly intervened, clearly trying to calm the situation. "Mom, it doesn't matter what happened before. The important thing is the present. And in the present, we are a family that needs to help each other. A family." I stood up again, feeling all the frustration accumulated over the years beginning to surface. A family that only shows up when there is money involved. A family that completely ignored me for 8 years while I struggled alone to survive. "We didn't ignore you," Patricia shouted, finally losing her composure. "We had our own responsibilities. We couldn't be looking out for you all the time." "Of course you couldn't," I replied sarcastically. "You were too busy spending money on new cars and house remodels while I was working cleaning other people's bathrooms just to eat." Michael stood up, and his heavy build suddenly intimidated me. When he got angry, his voice became very deep and his eyes turned red. "Mom, stop playing the victim. If you had financial problems, you should have told us." "Playing the victim?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Michael, you knew perfectly well what my situation was. You knew I lived alone, that I was a widow, that I didn't have a fixed income, but you were so busy with your own lives that you never bothered to ask if I needed help. Because you were always too proud," Patricia shouted. "You always said you could manage alone, because I had no other option, because my own children had abandoned me." The atmosphere in the small living room had become so tense that it felt as if the very air was difficult to breathe. Michael began to pace back and forth like a caged animal, while Patricia had stood up and was looking at me with an expression of pure frustration. "It's okay, Mom," Michael said, stopping in front of me. "Let's assume you're right and that we were terrible children. Does that mean you're going to punish us forever? Does that mean you're never going to forgive us?" "It's not about punishment or forgiveness, Michael. It's about the fact that I have plans for that money, and those plans do not include bailing you out of your own irresponsibilities." "What plans?" Patricia asked sharply. "You never do anything exciting. You never spend money on yourself. What are you going to do? Keep it under the mattress until you die." Her words deeply wounded me, but they also gave me a fury I hadn't felt in years. You want to know what my plans are? I yelled at them. My plans are not having to worry about money ever again. My plans are being able to go to the doctor when I feel sick without having to calculate if I can afford the consultation. My plans are being able to buy the food I want without having to check every dime. That's exactly what we're saying, Michael exclaimed. You already have all that secured. You have more money than you could spend in the rest of your life. That's why it would be smart to share a little with your family. The rest of my life I repeated, feeling the tears starting to burn my eyes. So now it turns out I'm so old that it's no longer worth it for me to enjoy my own money. It's not that, Mom. Patricia approached me with her arms outstretched as if to hug me, but I backed away. It's just that, well, at your age, how much can you really need? At that moment, something broke inside me. All the emotional wounds I had been holding onto for years, all the loneliness, all the abandonment, all the silent struggle, everything burst out like an erupting volcano. Get out! I screamed at them with a voice I didn't even recognize. Get out of my house right now. Mom, calm down. Michael tried to approach, but I grabbed the broom that was in the corner and raised it like a weapon. Don't come near me. Get out. I don't want to see you again until you learn to respect me. You're acting crazy, Patricia shouted. We just want to help you make intelligent decisions. Help me. I laughed hysterically. 8 years without helping me, and now you want to help me. The only help you want is to help yourselves to my money. Michael became more aggressive, approaching me dangerously. Mom, you're going to give us that money because we have a right to it. That property was Dad's and we are his children. I maintained that property alone for 8 years. I paid the taxes. I worried about it. You never did anything. It doesn't matter. Patricia had also become aggressive. Inheritance is inheritance. There is no inheritance. I shouted at them. The property no longer exists. I sold it and the money is mine. At that moment, Michael did something I never thought he would. He got so close to me that I could smell his beer breath on my face, and in a threatening voice he said, Mom, you are going to give us that money. We are your children, and we have a right to it. If you don't give it to us nicely, we'll have to find other ways. Are you threatening me, Michael? I asked him, although my voice trembled with fear. I'm not threatening you, Mom. I'm explaining reality to you. That money should be for the whole family, and if you don't understand that, we'll have to make you understand. Patricia nodded, fully supporting her brother. At that moment, I realized that my own children had become danger strangers, people capable of anything for money. Get out, I told them in a low but firm voice. Get out of my house right now. And don't come back until you are willing to apologize to me for everything you have said today. The two of them headed towards the door, but not with the defeated attitude I expected. Instead, they walked slowly, exchanging glances that gave me the chills. Before leaving, Michael turned to me with an expression I had never seen on his face, a mix of rage and determination that chilled my blood. This is not going to end here, Mom, he said in a low, threatening voice. You are going to reconsider your decision because we are not going to stand by while you keep all of our money. It's not your money. I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. And if you come back to my house with that attitude, I'll call the police. Patricia let out a sarcastic laugh. The police? Why, for coming to visit our own mother? Mom, I think the loneliness is affecting your mind. Maybe you should see a doctor. Her words hit me like stabs. You're telling me I'm crazy. I'm not saying you're crazy, Patricia replied with false sweetness. But you are making very strange decisions for a person your age. Maybe you need help managing so much money. Maybe you need someone else to make those decisions for you. The fear I felt at that moment was different from anything I had ever experienced before. It was not just physical fear, but a deep terror that my own children were capable of harming me in ways I couldn't even imagine. Go, I told them, but my voice sounded weak and broken. Please go and leave me alone. We're going, Mom, Michael said, but we'll be back. And next time, I hope you've reflected on your selfishness. After they left, I sat in my rocking chair for hours trembling, not from cold, but from shock. I couldn't believe that the children I had raised to whom I had given all my love in my life had become such cruel and greedy people. I felt as if I had met two dangerous strangers, not my own children. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Every noise I heard made me jump, thinking maybe they had returned. I got up several times to check that all the doors and windows were properly locked, something I had never done before in my life because I had always felt safe in my own house. The next day, I tried to continue with my normal routine, but everything had changed. When I went to feed my chickens, my hands were shaking so much that I spilled half the corn on the ground. When I tried to water my plants, I couldn't concentrate and ended up soaking the soil more than necessary. Around noon, I received a phone call that almost made my heart stop. It was Patricia, but her voice sounded completely different from how it had sounded the day before. Now, she spoke with a sweet and concerned tone as if nothing bad had happened between us. "Mom," she said, "I hope you slept well last night. I've been thinking a lot about our conversation yesterday, and I think maybe both sides said things we regret." "Patricia, I don't regret anything I said yesterday." "Oh, Mom, don't be like that. You know we love you very much, and the last thing we would want is to make you feel bad. Maybe we could find a solution that works for everyone." Her change in attitude made me even more nervous than her aggression the day before. At least when she had been angry, I knew what I was dealing with. This new manipulative version of my daughter scared me much more. There's nothing to negotiate, Patricia. "My decision is final." "Mom, why don't we meet again, but this time in a more relaxed environment? We could go to lunch at the Golden Corner Diner. Just you and me, mother and daughter. No pressure, no arguments, just a civilized conversation. I don't want to have any more conversations about this subject. Mom, please just give me a chance to better explain our situation. Maybe I didn't express myself correctly yesterday. Maybe if you listened to me more calmly, you could understand why we need your help." Something in her tone of voice made me suspect she had hidden motives, but a part of me wanted to believe that maybe she really had realized her mistake and wanted to genuinely apologize. Okay, I finally told her, but let it be clear that I'm not going to change my mind about the money. "Of course, Mom. I just want us to have a mother-daughter conversation." We agreed to meet the next day at the Golden Corner Diner, a small but cozy place downtown where they served the best home-style American food in the region. It was a public place with lots of people where I would feel safe. That night, I slept very poorly again with strange nightmares where Michael and Patricia chased me around the house demanding money. In one of the dreams, they had brought lawyers and police to force me to hand over everything, saying that I was too old to make my own decisions. The next day, I got dressed with special care. I put on my favorite pink dress, the one my late husband Edward had given me for my 50th birthday, and I styled my hair the way I liked best. I wanted to look dignified and respectable like the strong woman I had been all my life. I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes before the agreed time and asked for a table near the window where I could see the street. Patricia arrived exactly on time, but she didn't come alone. Aaron accompanied her, and that immediately put me on high alert. Aaron is a man about 40 years old, thin with a black mustache and always dressed in shirts that seemed too elegant for his personality. Since the day I met him, something about him had seemed false, as if he were acting all the time. He had that smile that never reached his eyes and that way of speaking that sounded like he was constantly trying to sell you something. "Hello, mother-in-law," he said with that false smile, giving me a kiss on the cheek that made me shiver. "It's great to see you. I hope you don't mind that I came." Patricia thought it would be good if I also participated in this family conversation. "Actually, I do mind," I replied directly because this was a conversation between my daughter and me. Patricia quickly intervened. "Mom, Aaron is part of the family. Besides, he understands a lot about finance and business, and I thought maybe he could help us find a solution that benefits everyone. I already told you there's nothing to negotiate." Aaron leaned forward with that expression he put on when he thought he was being very intelligent. "Mother-in-law, allow me to explain something about family finances. When a family has significant resources, the smartest thing is to distribute those resources strategically to maximize the benefit of all members. Aaron, With all due respect, my finances are none of your business, but they are my business, mother-in-law, because I am your daughter's husband. What affects Patricia affects me. And what affects us affects our children, your grandchildren. The mention of my grandchildren especially annoyed me because I knew he was using it as a tool of manipulation. My grandchildren are perfectly well cared for, and if you have financial problems, that is your responsibility, not mine. Mother-in-law. Aaron lowered his voice as if he were going to tell me a secret. Let me be completely honest with you. We are in a very difficult situation. If we don't get money soon, we could lose the house. Do you really want your grandchildren to be homeless? Patricia nodded dramatically, as if she were acting in a soap opera. It's true, Mom. The children don't understand why suddenly we can't buy them the things they need. Yesterday, my little one asked me why she couldn't take piano lessons anymore, and I didn't know what to tell her. Their attempts at emotional manipulation disgusted me. Patricia, if your children need something, you can talk to me specifically about those needs, but I'm not going to give you thousands of dollars, so you and your husband can continue living beyond your means. Aaron changed his strategy, adopting a more aggressive tone. Mother-in-law, I don't think you're understanding the seriousness of the situation. This is not just a request for help. We have legal rights to that inheritance. Legal rights? I laughed bitterly. What legal rights? I sold my property, a property that was in my name. And the money is in my bank account. The property was your husband's inheritance, and according to the law, children have rights over paternal inheritances. Aaron, you clearly know nothing about laws. When my husband died, that property legally became mine. I paid the taxes for 8 years. I kept the documents up to date. I took care of everything. Legally, that farm was completely mine. Aaron became visibly annoyed when he realized he didn't have a valid legal argument. His face flushed, and he began to nervously tap his fingers on the table. Patricia, for her part, had adopted that victim expression she had perfected since adolescence. Mom, Patricia said in a broken voice, as if she were about to cry, I can't believe you are so cruel to your own family. Are you really going to let your grandchildren suffer because of your selfishness? I'm not cruel, Patricia. I am a woman who finally learned to value herself after years of being ignored by her own children. Aaron intervened with a smile that gave me chills. Mother-in-law, maybe we should approach this from another perspective. A woman your age living alone with so much money, doesn't that seem dangerous to you? There are many criminals who specialize in robbing older people who have considerable savings. His words sounded like a barely disguised threat. Are you threatening me, Aaron? Of course not. Mother-in-law, I'm just worried about your safety. It would be terrible if something bad happened to you, especially now that you have so much cash. The waiter approached to take our order, but I had completely lost my appetite. The conversation had taken a turn that terrified me, and I realized that my own relatives were capable of intimidating me in ways I had never imagined. I'm not going to order anything, I told the waiter. I'm leaving right now. Mom, please don't go. Patricia begged, grabbing my arm as I stood up. We haven't finished talking yet. Yes, we have finished, I replied, pulling my arm free from her grip. And let it be very clear, I am not going to give you one dime of my money, no matter how much you threaten or manipulate me. We are not threatening you. Patricia shouted loud enough for other people in the restaurant to turn and look at us. We just want you to be reasonable. Being reasonable would mean giving you my money so you can continue living irresponsibly, I said, feeling the anger boiling in my veins again. But I am not going to be reasonable in that way. I left the restaurant as quickly as I could, but I could hear Aaron telling Patricia, Don't worry, my love. There are other ways to solve this problem. On the way back home, my hands were shaking so much that I could barely steer the car. Aaron's words echoed in my head like an alarm bell. There are other ways to solve this problem. What did he meant by that? That night, I called my neighbor Grace, the only person in the world I truly trusted. Grace was 70 years old. She had been a widow longer than me, and she had always been like an older sister to me. I told her everything that had happened, from the sale of the farm to Aaron's veiled threats. Martha Grace said with concern, Those children of yours have become dangerous. You can't stay alone in your house while they are acting like that. What am I supposed to do? Grace, hide from my own children. Not hide, but protect yourself. Have you thought about talking to the police and tell them that my children asked me for money and I refused? I haven't suffered any physical harm yet. Martha, that word yet scares me a lot. I think you should stay at my house for a few days until things calm down. That night, I stayed at Grace's house, but I couldn't sleep at all. Every noise startled me, thinking that maybe Michael and Patricia had come looking for me. Around at 3 hours 0 minutes in the morning, Grace got up to get me some water and found me awake looking out the window. "Martha, you have to tell me the truth," she said, sitting next to me. "What do you really need that money for?" "Because I know your personality very well, and I know you're not saving it just out of greed." For the first time since I had sold the farm, I told someone what my real plans for the money were. Grace listened in silence, and when I finished speaking, she had tears in her eyes. "Oh, Martha," she said, hugging me, "you are an incredible woman. Your children don't even deserve to know the truth of what you plan to do." The next day, I returned to my house because I couldn't hide forever. But as soon as I arrived, I realized that something was very wrong. The front door had marks around the lock, as if someone had tried to force it open. Some of my plants were trampled, and there were large boot prints in the dirt of my garden. Inside the house, although nothing had been stolen, everything had been slightly moved. My drawers were ajar, my papers had been shuffled, and the metal box where I kept the sales documents had been moved from its hiding place under the bed. My heart was beating so fast that I thought I would have a heart attack. Someone had broken into my house while I was away, and it wasn't hard to guess who it had been. Michael had had keys to my house for years for emergencies, and he had clearly decided to use them to look for information about my money. I immediately called to change the locks, but the locksmith told me he couldn't come until the next day. That night, I barricaded myself in my room, putting a chair under the door knob and sleeping with a kitchen knife under my pillow. The next morning, while waiting for the locksmith, I received a visit I didn't expect. It was Ethan, a second cousin of my late husband, a man in his 50s who worked as a mechanic in town. Ethan had always been a calm and honest person, and I was very surprised to see him at my house so early in the morning. "Cousin Martha," he said with a worried face, "I need to talk to you about something very serious. Last night I was at the Golden Eagle bar, and I overheard a conversation that left me very concerned." "What kind of conversation, Ethan?" "Your son Michael was there very drunk, talking to some men I didn't like at all. They were making plans that involve you." My stomach clenched with fear. What kind of plans they were talking about? Ways to force you to hand over the money? They mentioned something about making you sign papers. And one of the men said he knew someone who could falsify medical documents to declare you mentally incompetent. The world came crashing down on me. "Declare that I'm crazy." "Yes, cousin." They were saying that if they got a medical paper that said you had dementia or some mental problem, they could get a judge to give them legal control over your money. My worst nightmares were coming true. My own son was conspiring with strangers to steal not only my money, but also my dignity and my freedom. "Ethan, are you sure about what you heard?" "Completely sure, cousin. That's why I came to warn you so early. I think you have to take steps to protect yourself, and you have to do it now." At that moment, the locksmith arrived, and while he was changing my locks, I called a lawyer that Grace had recommended to me. I explained the whole situation, and he told me to come to his office immediately with all the sales documents for the property. Mrs. Martha, the lawyer, told me after reviewing all my papers, "You are in a very dangerous situation, but you are also in a very strong legal position. Everything is perfectly in order with the sale of your property, and no one can touch that money without your consent. However, if they are really planning to declare you incompetent, we need to act quickly to protect you. What can I do?" "First, we are going to get an independent medical evaluation that certifies that you are completely sane and capable. Second, we are going to prepare legal documents that protect your assets. And third, if necessary, we are going to get a restraining order against your children." That day was one of the longest of my life. Between doctors, lawyers, and legal procedures, I realized that my quiet life had turned into a nightmare. But I also realized something else. For the first time in years, I was fighting for something that truly mattered to me. And that fight was giving me a strength I didn't know I had. The next day, as I was returning from the pharmacy after buying some nerve medicine the doctor had prescribed, I saw Michael's black pickup truck parked in front of my house. But this time, he wasn't alone. There was another car I didn't recognize, a gray sedan with two men inside who seemed to be waiting for something. My heart started beating so fast I could hear it in my ears. I remembered Ethan's words about the strange men Michael had been talking to at the bar, and I knew immediately that those must be them. I hid behind the mango tree that is on the corner of my property and took out my cell phone to call Grace. "Grace," I whispered, "I'm hiding near my house. Michael is here with some men I don't know, and I think they are planning to do something terrible to me." "Where exactly are you?" Grace asked in an alarmed voice behind the mango tree. "But I can't stay here forever. Martha called the police right now, and I tell them that my son is visiting my house. You tell them you feel threatened and you need help. In the meantime, I'm on my way." I hung up the phone and dialed the emergency number. But before I could speak to anyone, I heard Michael's voice shouting my name from my yard. "Mom, I know you're around here. We just want to talk to you. Don't be ridiculous and come out from wherever you're hiding." His tone of voice didn't sound like someone who just wanted to talk. It sounded like someone who was rapidly losing patience. One of the men from the gray sedan got out of the car, and I could see him clearly for the first time. He was a tall guy with tattooed arms and a hostile face. He was wearing a tight black shirt that showed he exercised regularly, and he walked with that aggressive attitude of someone accustomed to intimidating people. "Are you sure she's here?" the man asked Michael. "She has to be here. Her neighbor told me she saw her return an hour ago." The second man also got out of the car. He was shorter but heavier with a beer belly and a scar that crossed his left cheek from his ear to his mouth. He was wearing a baseball cap and ripped jeans, and he had that way of moving that reminded me of the criminals who appeared on the news. "Look," Michael said, the man with the scar, "we don't have all day. If your mom doesn't want to cooperate nicely, we'll have to use other methods to convince her." "Give me a few more minutes," Michael replied, and I could hear the desperation in his voice. "She has to show up." At that moment, Patricia arrived in her white car, parking quickly and getting out with a furious look. She was wearing a purple dress I had never seen her in before, and high-heeled shoes that were clearly not appropriate for walking in the dirt of my yard. "Have you found her yet?" she asked the men without even greeting her brother. "No, but we know she's nearby," replied the tattooed man. "This is ridiculous," Patricia shouted, heading towards my house. "Mom, I know you can hear me. Stop acting like a child and come out and talk to us." From my hiding place behind the tree, I could see how the three men and Patricia moved around my property as if it were theirs. Michael checked behind the bushes. Patricia Daisha looked through the windows of the house, and the two strangers walked around as if they were evaluating the terrain. "Are you sure she can't be inside the house?" the man with the scar asked Patricia. "Impossible. She changed the locks yesterday and we don't have the new keys. That's no problem," the tattooed man said with a terrifying smile. "I can open any door in less than 5 minutes." "No," Michael shouted. "We can't break in. That would be breaking and entering." "And what do you suggest then?" Patricia asked impatiently. "We can't stay here all day waiting for her to show up." Just then, I heard the sound of sirens approaching, and my heart leaped with relief. Clearly, when I had dialed the emergency number, the call had connected, even though I'd hung up, and they had sent someone to investigate. The 4 conspirators also heard the sirens and immediately panicked. "Shit!" shouted the man with the scar. "Someone called the cops. Let's go now," said the tattooed man, running toward his car. "Wait!" Michael shouted at them. "We can't leave like this. It will look very suspicious." But the 2 men had already gotten into their gray sedan and were starting the engine. They sped off my property, kicking up a cloud of dust just as the police car turned the corner. Patricia and Michael were left standing there, trying to act as if nothing strange had happened, but I could see the panic on their faces. 2 police officers got out of the patrol car and approached my children. One of them was young, probably about 25 years old, and the other was older, looking like he had seen a lot in his career. "Good afternoon," the older officer said. "We received an emergency call from this phone number." But communication was cut off. "Everything's fine here." Michael managed to compose a fake smile. "Yes, officer, everything is fine. We were just visiting our mother." "And where is your mother?" the young officer asked, looking around. Patricia quickly intervened. "She must be in town running errands. We arrived and she wasn't here, so we decided to wait for her." "And the men we just saw leave in the gray car?" the older officer asked suspiciously. "What men?" Michael lied shamelessly. "We don't know what you're talking about." At that moment, I decided to come out of my hiding place. I couldn't allow my children to continue lying to the police, and besides, I realized it was safer to face the situation with the officers present. "Officers," I shouted, walking towards them. I made the call. Everyone turned to look at me. Michael and Patricia had faces of pure terror, while the officers seemed confused. "You are the owner of this house?" the older officer asked me. "Yes." "I am Martha, and these are my children. But, officer, they came here with 2 men who scare me a lot, and I had to hide because I feel threatened." "Mom, that's not true," Patricia shouted. "We only came to visit you. Why did you hide from your own children?" the young officer asked me. I briefly explained the situation, the sale of the farm, the aggressive demands for money, the veiled threats, and the plans they had been making to declare me mentally incompetent. The officers listened carefully, especially when I mentioned the strange men who had been with my children. "Mom," the older officer said, "do you have any evidence of these threats?" "My cousin Ethan heard them talking at the bar last night. He can confirm it." Michael became very aggressive. "All of that is lies. Our mother is inventing stories because she doesn't want to give us the money that legally belongs to us." "What money?" the young officer asked. "The money from the sale of a property that was our father's inheritance," Patricia replied. "She sold it without consulting us, and now she refuses to share the money with her family." "That property was mine," I said firmly. "I paid the taxes, I maintained it, and I had every legal right to sell it." The older officer looked at me with understanding. "Ma'am, you want to file a formal complaint against your children." Before I could answer, Michael exploded with rage. "This is ridiculous!" he shouted, approaching me dangerously. "That money is ours by right. And if you don't understand it nicely, we'll make you understand it the hard way." "Sir, step away from the lady," the young officer ordered, placing himself between Michael and me. But Michael had completely lost control. All the frustration and anger he had been accumulating for days burst out, and he headed towards me with his fists clenched. "You are going to give us that money right now!" he shouted, pushing the young officer who was trying to stop him. What happened next was all very fast. Michael managed to dodge the 2 officers and lunged at me with such fury that I didn't have time to move away. His shove was so violent that it threw me backward, and I fell heavily onto the stones of my garden. The pain I felt in my left side was indescribable, as if a knife had been plunged into me and was being twisted. I screamed in agony while the police wrestled with Michael to handcuff him. Patricia turned completely pale when she realized what her brother had done. "Michael, have you gone crazy?" from the ground with unbearable pain shooting through my side. I could see the horror on Patricia's face as the police handcuffed Michael. My older son struggled like a wild animal, shouting obscenities and threats while the officers held him. "Let go of me! That crazy old woman is stealing our money!" he kept yelling with saliva drooling from the corner of his mouth. The older officer immediately called an ambulance on the radio, while the younger one kept Michael controlled. Patricia approached me, but when she tried to help me up, I cried out in pain. "Don't touch me! Stay away from me!" I told her, feeling the tears streaming down my cheeks, not just from the physical pain, but from the emotional betrayal. "Mom, please let me help you," Patricia pleaded in a broken voice. "Michael didn't mean to hurt you. He just lost control." "Didn't mean to hurt me." "No," I repeated in disbelief. "Your brother just broke my ribs and you're telling me he didn't mean to hurt me." The paramedics arrived in less than 10 minutes, and while they examined me to determine the severity of my injuries, I could hear the older officer interrogating Patricia about the men who had fled when the sirens arrived. "Miss, I need you to tell me exactly who those men were and what they were doing here." Patricia stammered, clearly nervous. I don't know them very well." "They're friends of my brother. Friends who fled when we arrived. Doesn't that seem suspicious to you?" "Officer, I didn't know they were coming. Michael didn't tell me anything about bringing anyone else. One of the paramedics, a man about 40 years old with very gentle hands, was carefully checking my side." "Mom, you definitely have at least one fractured rib, possibly two. We need to take you to the hospital immediately for x-rays." As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I could see Michael being put into the patrol car. For a moment, our eyes met, and for the first time since this whole nightmare had begun, I saw something close to remorse in his eyes. "Mom!" he shouted from the car. "I didn't want this to happen. I just wanted— It's too late, Michael!" I shouted back, feeling all the emotional pain of years turn into words. "It's too late to be sorry." At the hospital, while I was having x-rays and tests done, Grace arrived completely breathless. The poor woman had run so much she could barely breathe. "Oh, Martha, how do you feel? Does it hurt a lot? My soul hurts more than my body." "Grace, I can't believe my own son did this to me." "And Patricia, where is she?" "I don't know and I don't care. She was an accomplice to all of this." The doctor, a young doctor with a kind face, came to explain the results of the studies. "Mrs. Martha, you have 2 fractured ribs on the left side. It is not a life-threatening injury, but it is going to be very painful for the next few weeks. You need absolute rest and pain medication. Doctor, how long will I be like this?" "Ribs take between 6 and 8 weeks to heal completely. During that time, you cannot do physical exertion. You cannot lift heavy things, and you have to be very careful when moving." While the doctor was explaining the care instructions, the older officer arrived with a notebook in his hand. "Mrs. Martha, I need to take a formal statement from you about what happened. Do you feel well enough to talk?" "Yes, officer." "I want everything to be officially recorded." I told him the whole story from the beginning. The sale of the farm, the first demands for money, the escalating threats, the conspiracy to declare me incompetent, and finally the physical attack. "Ma'am, this is very serious. Your son is arrested for elder abuse, which is a felony. Do you want to press formal charges?" The question hit me like a bucket of cold water. It was one thing to be angry with Michael and quite another to send him to jail. But when I thought about everything that had happened, all the threats, all the malicious plans, I realized I had no other choice. "Yes, officer. I want to press charges not just for the physical attack, but for all the threats and intimidation." The officer nodded and continued taking notes. "We are also going to investigate those men who were with him. Your description matches some known local criminals." That night, I stayed in the hospital for observation, and Grace stayed with me. Around at 22 hours 0 minutes at night, I received a call I didn't expect. It was Patricia, and by her voice, I could tell she had been crying. "Mom," she said in a broken voice, "I need to talk to you. Please, I have nothing to talk about with you, Patricia." "Mom, please. Michael is in jail and all of this got completely out of control. I never wanted you to be physically hurt, but you did want me to be emotionally hurt. You did want me to be robbed of my money. You did want me to be declared crazy." "I didn't know about declaring you crazy, Mom. That was Aaron's idea and those horrible men. And why didn't you defend me? Why didn't you protect me when you knew they were planning to harm me?" Patricia remained silent for several seconds. "Why?" "Because we needed the money, Mom. We're in a very desperate situation." "Well, now you are in an even more desperate situation. Your brother is going to jail, and you are going to have to face the legal consequences of your actions. Mom, please don't let Michael go to jail. He has problems with alcohol and gambling, but he is not a bad person. He just needs help. Patricia, your brother broke 2 of my ribs. He physically attacked me in front of the police. That is not something that can be forgiven with a simple apology. What if we give you back all the money we asked for? What if we promise never to bother you again? What money are you going to give me back if you never gave me a single dime? And how are you going to promise me not to bother me if you just proved you are capable of anything? The next day, when I was discharged from the hospital, my lawyer came to visit me at Grace's house where I was going to stay during my recovery. Mrs. Martha, the lawyer, told me I have important news. The police arrested the 2 men who were with your son. It turns out they have criminal records for fraud and extortion. One of them confessed that your son had contacted them to help him intimidate you. And what is going to happen now? Your son is going to face very serious charges. Elder abuse conspiracy to commit fraud and intimidation. He could receive several years in prison. The news left me with very contradictory feelings. On the one hand, I was glad that justice was working. But on the other hand, the idea that my own son was going to spend years in jail broke my heart. And my daughter, she is also going to have legal problems. It depends. If she cooperates with the investigation and testifies against the other conspirators, it is possible that she will only receive a warning. But if it is proven that she actively participated in the intimidation plans, she could also face charges. That afternoon, while resting on Grace's sofa with a pillow propped against my broken ribs, I received a completely unexpected visit. It was Aaron, but he came alone and with a completely different attitude from the one he had had at the restaurant. "Mother-in-law," he said in a humble voice, "I know I have no right to be here, but I need to talk to you." "What do you want, Aaron? Are you also coming to threaten me?" "No, mother-in-law. I came to apologize and to explain the truth about everything that happened." Grace, who had been in the kitchen preparing iced tea, immediately came out when she heard voices. "Martha, do you want me to call the police?" "No," Grace let him speak. "I want to hear what excuses he has." Aaron sat on the edge of the chair, clearly nervous. "Mother-in-law, the truth is that all of this was my fault. I was the one who convinced Patricia and Michael that you owed them part of the money." "Why did you do that, Aaron?" "Because we are in a desperate financial situation. We owe more than $120,000 between credit card debts, bank loans, and money I owe to very dangerous people." For the first time, I could see genuine fear in his eyes. "Dangerous people." "Yes, mother-in-law. People who don't accept excuses and who have threatened to hurt my family if I don't pay them soon." Finally, I was hearing the truth, and it was even worse than I had imagined. "And you thought the solution was to rob me of my money?" "It wasn't robbing, mother-in-law. I genuinely believed that you had a moral obligation to help your family. But I realized I was wrong when I saw what happened to you yesterday. You realized you needed to see your brother-in-law breaking my ribs to realize that you were doing something wrong." Aaron lowered his head, clearly ashamed. "Mother-in-law, I came here to ask for your forgiveness and to tell you that I am going to testify in your favor at the trial. I am going to confess all my participation in this horrible plan." His words surprised me. "Why would you do that?" "Don't you realize that could get you into legal trouble because it's the right thing to do, mother-in-law? And because I hope that maybe someday you can find a way in your heart to forgive my wife. Patricia was led astray by my influence, but deep down she loves you very much." Aaron's words left me completely bewildered. Throughout all these days, I had been so focused on protecting myself and dealing with the betrayal that I hadn't had time to truly process my own feelings towards my children. Yes, I was furious and hurt, but beneath all that anger, there was still love. A deeply wounded love, but love nonetheless. "Aaron," I told him after several minutes of silence, "I appreciate you coming to apologize, but apologies don't heal broken ribs or erase death threats. I know, mother-in-law, and I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. I just wanted you to know the truth, and I wanted to ask you something." "What?" "When all this ends? When Michael gets out of jail and when we have paid for our mistakes, would there be any possibility that we could rebuild this family? Not for the money, but because your grandchildren need you in their lives." The mention of my grandchildren hit me right in the heart. Throughout this whole nightmare, I had tried not to think about them, about how all of this was going to affect them. They were innocent children who were not to blame for the terrible decisions their parents had made. "My grandchildren will always be welcome in my life," I told him firmly. "But that doesn't mean I'm going to automatically forgive their parents. I understand, mother-in-law. I just ask that with time, you consider the possibility." After Aaron left, Grace and I remained silent for a long time. Finally, she broke the silence with a question I had been avoiding thinking about. Martha, what are you going to do with the money now? It was the first time anyone had asked me that question, without ulterior motives, without trying to get something from me. Grace asked it out of genuine curiosity and because she cared about my well-being. Grace, I think it's time I told you what my real plans for that money were. I settled better on the sofa trying to find a position that didn't hurt so much, and I told my dear friend the secret I had been keeping since the day I received the purchase offer. Do you remember my sister Susan? Of course, the one who died of cancer 5 years ago. Before she died, Susan made me promise something. She made me promise that if I ever had the resources to do it, I would help other women who were going through the same thing she went through. Grace looked at me attentively, waiting for me to continue. Susan had to sell her house, her car, and even our mother's jewelry to pay for her cancer treatments. In the end, it wasn't enough. And she died in debt and without having received all the treatments she needed. Tears began to roll down my cheeks as I remembered my younger sister who had fought so bravely against that terrible disease. My plan was to use the money from the sale to create a fund to help low-income women who had cancer. Not all the money, of course. I was going to save a part for my own security, but the majority was going to be to fulfill the promise I made to Susan. Grace was silent for several seconds, and when she finally spoke, she had tears in her eyes. Oh, Martha, you are an incredible woman, and to think that your children wanted to steal that money that was going to help so many needy people. Grace, the saddest thing of all is that if they had asked me about my plans with respect and affection, maybe I would have found a way to help them too. But they never gave me the opportunity. They just assumed they had a right to my money and tried to take it by force. Are you going to go ahead with your original plans? Yes, Grace. More than ever, this experience has taught me how important it is to help people who truly need it, not people who simply want to live beyond their means. The next day, I received a call from my lawyer with news about the case. Mrs. Martha, I have important updates. Your son Michael pleaded guilty to all charges and accepted a sentence of 2 years in jail with the possibility of parole after 1 year if he completes a rehabilitation program for alcoholism and gambling addiction. And the other men, the 2 of them, received longer sentences because they already had previous records. The main organizer of the plan to declare you incompetent received 5 years. And my daughter. Your daughter decided to cooperate fully with the investigation and testify against everyone else. In exchange, she only received probation and the obligation to do community service for 1 year. Community service. Yes, specifically working with seniors in a care facility. The judge thought it would be appropriate given the circumstances. That afternoon, while I was resting in Grace's garden, I received a visit I didn't expect. It was Patricia. But she looked completely different from how I had seen her in weeks. She had lost weight, had deep dark circles under her eyes, and was wearing simple clothes that looked old. Mom, she said in a barely audible voice, I know I have no right to be here, but I needed to see you before I start my community service. What do you want, Patricia? I want to ask for your forgiveness, Mom. Not a superficial apology, but a genuine forgiveness from daughter to mother. She sat in a chair near me, but maintaining a respectful distance. Mom, these last few days I've had a lot of time to think about everything that happened, and I realized that I not only failed you as a daughter, but I became a person I don't even recognize myself. Patricia, words are easy. Actions are what count. I know, Mom. That's why I'm not asking you to forgive me right now. I'm just asking that perhaps with time you can consider giving me a chance to show you that I can be better. And Aaron, are you still married to him? Patricia lowered her gaze. We are getting divorced. I realized that he was the one who manipulated me to act against you, and I can't be married to someone who made me hurt my own mother. Her words surprised me. I hadn't expected her to make such a drastic decision. And the children are going to stay with me. Aaron agrees because he knows his debts put him in danger, and he doesn't want to expose the children to those dangerous people. How are you going to support them alone? I got a part-time job in an office in addition to the community service. It's not going to be easy, but I prefer to live with financial difficulties than to live with the guilt of what I did to you. For the first time in weeks, I could see my real daughter beneath all the greed and manipulation. It was the child I had raised, the young woman she had been before Aaron's influence corrupted her. Patricia, I have one condition for considering forgiving you someday. Whatever it is, Mom, I want you to go to therapy. I want you to understand how you came to be capable of betraying your own mother, and I want you to make sure it never happens again. I've already started, Mom. It's part of the terms of my probation. But even if it wasn't mandatory, I would do it. And what are you going to tell my grandchildren about all of this? I'm going to tell them the truth in an age-appropriate way. I'm going to tell them that their mom made very serious mistakes, that she hurt their grandmother, and that she is working very hard to be a better person. After Patricia left, I thought for hours about everything that had happened. My life had completely changed in the space of a few weeks. I had lost confidence in my children. I had been betrayed by my own family. I had suffered physical injuries, but I had also discovered an inner strength I didn't know I had. That night, I called my lawyer to start the process of establishing the foundation in memory of my sister Susan. I decided to call it the Susan Hope Foundation and dedicate it specifically to helping low-income women who were fighting cancer. 3 months later, when my ribs had completely healed, I had the inauguration ceremony for the foundation. Grace was there with me along with several neighbors and community members who had known Susan. To my surprise, Patricia also came. But she stayed at the back of the event without approaching me. After the ceremony, she approached timidly. "Mom," she said, "I just wanted to tell you that I'm very proud of what you're doing. Aunt Susan would be happy to know that her memory is helping so many women. Thank you, Patricia." "Mom, do you think someday we can have a normal relationship again?" I looked at her for several seconds before answering, "Patricia, I think we are never going to have the relationship we had before because that relationship was based on a trust that was broken. But maybe with a lot of time and a lot of work, we can build something new. That's all I can ask for, Mom." 6 months later, I received a letter from Michael from jail. It was the first communication I had with him since the day he broke my ribs. "Mom," the letter said, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that every day in this prison, I think about what I did to you, and every day I hate myself more for it. I am in a recovery program for alcoholics and gambling addicts. And for the first time in years, I am starting to understand how sick I was. I am not asking you to forgive me because I know that will take a long time if it ever happens. I just wanted you to know that I deeply regret it and that when I get out of here, I am going to dedicate the rest of my life to trying to make amends for the harm I caused you." When I finished reading the letter, I realized that for the first time since all this had started, I didn't feel anger towards my children. I hadn't completely forgiven them, and maybe I never would entirely, but I had found something close to peace. Today, 1 year after selling the property, my life is completely different. The Susan Hope Foundation has helped more than 50 women with their cancer treatments. Patricia has finished her community service and has proven to be a responsible mother who is raising my grandchildren well. Michael will get out of jail in 6 months. And although I don't know if we can rebuild our relationship, at least I know he is working on becoming a better person. And I have learned something fundamental, that money is not the most important thing in life, but self-respect is. I learned that it is okay to say no even to family. I learned that protecting what is yours does not make you a selfish person, but a strong person. And above all, I learned that sometimes the most painful mistakes can lead you to discover who you really are and what you're capable of. My name is Martha. I am 65 years old, and I finally learned to value myself as much as I always valued others.